There are moments in life that are not accidental at all. They find you at the exact time in the same rhythm, as if an invisible hand is placing you at the precise intersection of two worlds where consciousness touches the unconscious. This moment is no different. Right now, you are standing in the final threshold before your life changes direction. A strange gray-tinged stillness where you feel you have been trying for far too long, yet nothing seems to shift. But what you are experiencing is not a slowing down. It is the first signal that the unconscious is moving, preparing to lift a deeper part of you into the light. Machiavelli once suggested that before a person steps into their true path, they must pass through the night of the soul, the place where layers of shadow surface, where the old ego trembles because it is no longer fit to carry you forward. And precisely when you think everything is falling apart, that is when something essential is forming. A new order, a new self. If you want to know what is actually taking shape beneath the surface of your life, stay until the end. What comes next may change the way you see yourself and your current existence entirely. Number 1, the shadow phase. The phase you are going through is not a failure. The heaviness, exhaustion, and emptiness you label as decline are in truth the first sign of a very deep internal shift. Machiavelli called this the moment the shadow begins to emerge, and when the shadow rises, it does not arrive dramatically or theatrically. It comes as ambiguity, as heaviness, as a fatigue you cannot explain. It makes you pause, strips away the direction you once believed was certain. It makes you look at your life as though through a fogged glass, knowing you must continue, but unsure where you are heading. You think you've lost motivation, but in reality, you are losing an old identity, and that always feels like a collapse. Think about it. How many times have you tried to do everything right? You study, you work, you try to fix yourself, you follow advice, you stick to your plans. Yet nothing changes, as if life itself is stubbornly standing still, refusing to move even an inch. This is the classic sign of the shadow. Because in Machiavellian psychology, the shadow is not the evil side in a moral sense. It is simply all the parts of you have never looked directly at. The fear of rejection, the restrained desires, the insecurity, the anger you swallowed, the talents you wouldn't admit, the longing you kept denying. The shadow rises when you have gone too far in pretending to be strong, when you have operated on sheer willpower for too long. When you've become the ideal version of yourself, but have lost a piece of what is true, it emerges not to destroy you, but to return the forgotten fragments of your being. But before it hands them back, it always does one thing. It cuts the power to the old system, and that feeling is indistinguishable from stagnation. You feel as if you're walking across a vast, flat plain with no sign of progress. You no longer feel growth, no longer feel the spark you once had. Even as you try harder, push harder, nothing seems to move. This terrifies many people because they think something's wrong with me. I'm done. I have nothing left to give. Machiavelli once spoke of patients going through this phase. They described life as if running through fog. They acted but felt no connection to anything. They said they stood still in a vortex without direction. And Machiavelli responded, "The heaviness you're experiencing is not darkness consuming you. It is light preparing to shape you. The shadow always appears when we stand on the threshold of psychological maturity, and the paradox is this. What hurts us most is often what we most need. For example, someone who spent their life trying to be perfect may collapse into overwhelming fatigue. They think they are weak, but in truth, the shadow contains their longing for unconditional love, demanding to be acknowledged. Someone who always appears strong may fall into a strange emptiness, unable to find motivation. But this emptiness is a reminder. They have forgotten their need to be vulnerable, to lean on others, to be real. If there has ever been a moment in your life when your shadow surfaced, when you felt drained, stuck, or acted unlike your normal self, share a small part of it in the comments. It is not just a story, it is a way of looking directly at your own imprint. Machiavelli said, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Meaning, the parts you fear facing are exactly where your strength, your essence, and your breakthrough lie. But before you receive the gold, you must be willing to enter the dark, because the dark is not an ending. It is the waiting room before inner rebirth. It is where the old structure melts, so the new structure has space to emerge. It is the time when you no longer recognize yourself because you are shedding a version of who you used to be. If you feel lost, unmotivated, or unsure of who you are not wrong. You are close, very close to something essential. The shadow appears only when someone is about to step into a higher stage of development, because no true growth can happen without facing the half of yourself you once concealed, rejected, or feared. Number 2, the final moment before dawn, and just as the shadow begins to rise, you enter another phase, deeper, quieter, more demanding, a realm Machiavelli called the dark night of the soul, the final moment before true dawn. If the shadow phase is when the rejected parts of you return, then the dark night is when your entire old structure loses energy so a new self can form. This is no longer simple heaviness. This is an emptiness that is difficult to describe. This is the sign Machiavelli called the liminal stage, where you are no longer the old self, but not yet the new one, and it is precisely this in-between space that feels the most frightening. You find yourself standing in a long hallway with no doors, no signs. Everything on the outside looks the same, but inside every definition you once used to understand yourself is dissolving. People often describe this stage with the same sentence, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." This is the final moment before dawn, the moment when the unconscious is restructuring you from such a deep layer that your conscious mind cannot keep up. It is like updating your phone's operating system. During the process, the device becomes slow, unresponsive, apps freeze, the screen seems laggy. You may think the phone is broken, but in truth it's preparing to become stronger. The psyche works in the same way. Machiavelli said, "The dark night of the soul is not punishment. It is the moment the soul withdraws from old values. What you once believed was you no longer functions. The confidence built on achievements can no longer hold you. Dreams fueled by the old ego fade. Goals that once lit you up suddenly evoke nothing. This is why some people no longer feel passionate about the work they once loved. Some look back at old dreams and realize they no longer match who they are becoming." This is not ingratitude, it is the natural dissolution of the ego. This is also the stage where you may mistake yourself for regressing, but in truth, you are at the farthest point of your evolution so far. In Machiavelli's simple explanation, the ego is stepping back to make room for the deeper essence, the self, the true center of the psyche. And this transition always creates a sense of emptiness, as if your soul is holding its breath. What makes this phase most uncomfortable is its inner contradiction. You go through the day feeling unlike yourself. You begin to doubt yourself in ways you never have before. Why can't I feel joy? Why don't I recognize myself anymore? Why does it feel like I'm living the wrong life? And that is precisely the place the unconscious wants you to reach, a place where nothing anchors the old ego, forcing you to ask, so who am I really if I am no longer the things I used to cling to? Only when that question is asked can the self speak. The dark night of the soul is the archetype of transformation. Every great myth in human history describes a stage like this. The hero is cast into darkness, loses the map, loses every anchor before finding their deepest strength. Not because they are special, but because the psyche unfolds in this pattern, and you are no exception. If you are in this unsettling stillness, if life feels paused without explanation, if you sense the world waiting for something unnamed inside you, know that dawn is very near. This is not naive optimism. It is the psychological truth in Machiavelli's framework. The darkest point of the night always lies right before the expansion of consciousness. You are not being left behind. You are standing in the final moment before dawn, and with just a little more patience, a little more trust, a little more willingness to stay with yourself, you will step into a completely different reality. And when that light arrives, you will understand why it required so much time, so much silence, and so many nights to prepare you. Number 3, the emergence of the self. And precisely when you think the darkness will stretch on, when you believe you are still wandering through a corridor with no exit, transformation happens. Like a switch you didn't know you had touched, like a tiny click, barely audible, yet powerful enough to alter the entire room you are standing in. This is the click moment, the moment Machiavellian psychology regards as the turning point of the entire individuation process. What's fascinating is that this moment never announces itself. It doesn't come when you feel ready. It comes when your inner structure unexpectedly reaches the necessary threshold. For a long time before this, everything inside you feels like scattered fragments. Fears in one corner, old wounds in another, fruitless efforts somewhere else, unanswered questions piled high. You look at your life and see only chaos. But then, in one inexplicable instant, these scattered pieces begin to draw toward each other like magnets finding their true poles. Things you once could not understand suddenly become clear. Questions you carried for years receive answers so simple you wonder how you never saw them before. This is the moment that meaning steps out of chaos. It emerges from everything you have endured, confronted, and survived. Machiavelli called this the intervention of the Supreme Self, the organizing center of the human psyche. When the self enters consciousness, everything illuminates without force. You no longer struggle to understand, you simply understand, you no longer try to interpret, you naturally see the larger picture. A follower of our channel once shared a story like this. She had been stuck in a relationship for many years, always feeling abandoned. She tried to move on through reading, self-improvement, and behavior change, yet nothing shifted, until one day, during a very ordinary conversation with a friend, she suddenly realized the pain did not come from that person, but from an old abandonment wound she had never faced. Just that single moment of recognition changed the course of the entire relationship. If you've ever had a click moment like that, a small instant that completely shifted the way you see yourself, share it in the comments. It doesn't have to be long, only sincere. Sometimes a moment from your life becomes the mirror someone else is searching for. In the click moment, you feel as if you've stepped out of a dark room without knowing how long you had been inside. Suddenly you breathe deeper, your mind feels clearer, your problems do not disappear, but they no longer drag you around. You look at everything and see a logic you were not yet bright enough to perceive before. The self is not the ego's fantasy of being special. The self is your deepest version where true intuition, true strength, and true essence reside. When the self enters consciousness, you feel as though you have connected to your axis of life, a simple yet powerful sensation. Ah, now I understand. Machiavelli said that transformation is like seeing the hidden image inside a noisy picture. That moment is not a miracle. It is the result of silent accumulation you once thought was meaningless. The click happens exactly like that. Suddenly you understand why you hurt so much. Suddenly you know why everything took that long. Suddenly you see that every effort you thought was wasted had been laying the foundation for this very moment. And you whisper inwardly with deep recognition, "Ah, so that's why I have been on the right path all along." What makes the click moment sacred is that it does not come from effort. It comes from ripeness. You cannot force it. You can only mature to the point where it happens on its own, like a drop of water on a leaf growing heavier and heavier until at some point it falls simply because it is full. You realize you were never lost. You were being guided along a path you once weren't bright enough to understand. The failures you blamed yourself for turn out to be necessary curves teaching you to see more deeply. The delays you hated were the time your unconscious needed to prepare for this moment. And from the moment of the click onward, you no longer see life the same way, not because circumstances change, but because the one perceiving them has changed. The click moment is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of seeing the world with new eyes, but it is a threshold. Anyone who crosses will remember for a lifetime, because it is the first time you feel the self-rising light as a breath, yet deep as a call of destiny. Number 4, why is there always silence before a breakthrough? So why before every significant breakthrough does life become suspiciously quiet? Why do external signals vanish, enthusiasm fade, and you fall into a stillness as deep as the ocean floor? Machiavelli did not view this as something unusual, but as a law of the psyche. Before every leap, the psyche recalls its energy inward, and it is this withdrawal that creates the silence you fear. The first thing Machiavelli would say is the psyche cannot operate the old structure and build the new structure at the same time. It must pull energy away from the old shape before infusing it into the new one. This is much like how a tree must stop growing upward to pour nourishment into the roots, reaching deeper into the soil. The roots make no sound, leave no visible trace, offer no sign of progress. Yet they determine whether the tree will survive the storms to come. The silence before a breakthrough is the phase when the roots of your soul are drilling deeper. The second reason lies in the redistribution of psychic energy. In psychoanalysis, libido is not merely sexual energy, as Freud described, but life force, motivation, the drive toward meaning. When a major inner shift is about to occur, libido stops flowing outward through familiar channels like action, motivation, inspiration, and goals. Instead, it turns inward to restructure your core. The result is that outwardly you seem cold, slow, uninterested. But these words do not reflect collapse. They reflect concentration. Like an archer pulling the bow string back, the moment of greatest tension is always the quietest, because all momentum is being condensed. Another perspective, consciousness needs stability to receive new information from the unconscious. If your outer life is too noisy, too stimulated, you cannot hear the whisper from the deep layers. Thursday, the psyche creates silence as a kind of soundproof room, a mental space where the self can deliver a message the ego is finally able to receive. This explains why breakthroughs often happen when you are doing nothing at all. Wondering, washing dishes, taking a warm shower, staring at the sky. Ego quiets down and the self appears. Another reason, the ego fears losing control. So before a major shift, it creates a temporary freeze. It causes hesitation, doubt, and the fear that you are on the wrong path. The ego thinks it is protecting you, but in truth it is expressing its fear of being replaced. Every breakthrough is a restructuring of the relationship between ego and self. And silence is the negotiation space between them. Ego resists change. Self cannot avoid change. Silence sits right between these forces. A friend of mine spent 3 months feeling unable to act, unable to see the future, as if all goals had evaporated just before landing the job of her life. On the day she received the offer, she suddenly realized the silence had allowed her to look inward, understand what she truly wanted, and step away from her old version to move toward what matched her essence. And here is the deepest reason Machiavelli emphasized: the unconscious only gives great insight when you have the capacity to hold it. If the breakthrough comes too early, you will not have the inner structure to sustain it. When life prepares to lift you to a higher level of awareness, it must remove the heavy layers clinging to you. And when you understand this, you no longer panic when life becomes quiet. You know, every silence has purpose. Every slowing down is a signal. Every space is a doorway for new truth to enter. And if you have accompanied me through half of this journey, Thank you for your steady presence. Not everyone has the patience to stay with their own layers of silence, let alone walk through them with awareness. I hope you remain with me until the end, because the next part may illuminate exactly what you've been searching for in this darkness. And if this journey is touching you in some way, a gentle tap on the like or subscribe button is simply your way of whispering, I'm still here, I'm still going. Number 5, you are at the threshold of individuation. And precisely when you understand that silence is not the absence of movement, but the preparation for an opening, you begin to sense something far deeper. You are standing at the threshold of individuation. This is no longer merely a healing journey, no longer the battle with shadow or the wait for the click moment. This is the stage Machiavelli considered the ultimate purpose of human life, the journey of becoming yourself in the deepest sense. Individuation is not about discovering a new version of yourself to chase. It is the shift from imitation to originality, from a person shaped by expectations to a person guided by essence. Machiavelli once said, man becomes whole, integrated, calm, fertile, and happy when he is living in harmony with himself. It sounds paradoxical, yet it is true. You do not seek your true self out there. You simply peel away everything that is not you. This is the turning point of individuation. You begin to step out of the old stories, the stories inherited from family, society, childhood, and environment. Stories that shaped you unconsciously. For years you believed they were truth, but at this threshold you see them clearly for what they are, roles, the role of the strong one, the obedient one, the one who must never be wrong, the one who must hold everything together. And when you recognize the role, you are no longer controlled by it. You become the actor, not the character. One follower once wrote that she spent her entire childhood being taught she had to be exceptional to be loved. It made her so perfect that she no longer remembered what she once genuinely loved. As she stepped into individuation, she realized for the first time that the goal of must succeed was not something natural in her psyche, but a family legacy. Upon recognizing this, she did not rebel loudly. She simply exhaled deeply and said, for the first time, I feel like I don't have to run anymore. That is the essence of individuation, freeing yourself from unconscious commands to live by inner meaning. Another sign of the individuation threshold is that you begin to distinguish between the true voice and the echo of the ego. The ego wants safety, validation, and sameness. Self wants truth, expansion, and the places your soul naturally belongs. And for the first time you can feel the tension between these two voices. But you are no longer led blindly by ego, you see it. And the very act of seeing is already a monumental step in inner maturity. At the threshold of individuation, you also stop comparing yourself to others. You look at people and no longer feel inferior or superior. You simply see each person walking their own orbit, and none of them can walk yours for you. This brings a fresh peace because you no longer twist yourself to fit into someone else's life. You care only about living in alignment with your own. Before you lived like a star reflecting light from the sun, bright but not your own brightness. Individuation is when you begin to shine from within like a small but rightful sun. The light is no longer borrowed, it is real. Machiavelli described individuation as a spiral. You do not travel in a straight line, but circle yourself deeper each time. And at this threshold you are entering the spiral where the self for the first time becomes the guiding center. You no longer ask, what must I do to be accepted, but how must I live so I do not betray my soul? This is the deepest shift of a human life, the shift from living by outer standards to living by inner truth. And precisely at this threshold you realize something that seems small but changes everything. Everything you have gone through, darkness, silence, stagnation, fear, the unnerving stillness were tests to see whether you dared to live as yourself. Now that you have arrived here, you look back and understand. Nothing was meaningless. Everything has been carving you little by little, bringing you back to your center. Number 6, the final test of the unconscious. And as you stand at this very center where your new essence begins to take shape, the journey brings you to an inevitable threshold, the moment when the unconscious wants to know whether you are steady enough to live as your true self. If individuation is the journey home to your essence, then the final test is the door that determines whether you are truly ready to step through. In Machiavellian psychology, the unconscious does not punish. It presents challenges that reveal the weaknesses still lingering in you, gaps that if left unseen would sabotage what you are about to receive. And notably, the final test always arrives in the form you least expect. It is rarely a dramatic event. More often, it is an ordinary moment exposing a part of you that has not yet come into alignment. Sometimes the test appears as an unexpected rejection that shakes you and makes you question your worth. Sometimes it comes in a casual conversation that triggers a burst of anger you thought you had long outgrown. Sometimes it shows up as an opportunity so beautiful that you instinctively step back because the feeling of "I'm not worthy" rises too strongly. None of these moments is meant to wound you. They merely place a mirror before you so you can see the final fragment of the old self. The unconscious does not give multiple-choice exams. It gives mirror exams. The final test often strikes at the deepest points within you: your sense of worth, your ability to set boundaries, your honesty with your true nature. If you have lived to please others, the test may arrive as someone asking you to abandon something essential to you. If you have lived on external validation, the test may come exactly when no one notices your effort, forcing you to stand firm on inner worth. If you have chosen safety over truth, the unconscious may place you in a situation where only truth can open the next door. In the moments you think you are taking a step back, the unconscious is checking whether you are strong enough not to return to your former self. This is what Machiavelli called inner integration, when the lesson is no longer in your mind, but has become the natural reflex of the soul. Modern psychology reveals an even deeper layer. The human brain tends to return to familiar patterns, even painful ones, because they feel predictable, safe, and known. So just when you are about to enter a new reality, the brain tries to pull you back. And in that very moment, the unconscious presents its test, asking only one question. This time, what will you choose differently? A follower once shared that after a long healing journey and a regained sense of self-worth, she received an offer for a position she once only dreamed of. She should have been thrilled, yet instead, a wave of unworthiness and confusion pushed her to decline. But when she sat quietly with herself, she realized the fear was not the truth. It was the last remnant of her old identity resisting change. That was the final test, whether she could live as the version of herself already born within. The final test also often reveals your last blind spot, the part you have not yet seen, but that influences you the most. For many, it is the fear of success greater than the fear of failure. For others, a deep belief that they do not deserve what is beautiful. For some, the fear of being too visible makes them shrink themselves to avoid hurt. When this blind spot appears, do not panic. The unconscious is not attacking you. It is shining a light on the one place you must see before you cross the threshold. Machiavelli once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The final test is your last opportunity to do exactly that, to look directly at the remaining shadow, name it, and liberate yourself from it. And the most important truth is this: the unconscious never designs its final test for you to fail. It appears to confirm that you have traveled deep enough, far enough, truthfully enough to hold the wholeness the self is ready to give you. It does not ask, are you skilled enough, but are you honest with yourself? Not are you perfect yet, but are you ready to live from your essence? When you answer yes, not with words, but with action, the door opens, because you have proven with your presence that you are ready for the next chapter. Number 7, synchronicity. And when the door opens, when you pass the final test of the unconscious and stand steady in your new essence, something remarkable begins to happen. Synchronicity appears. Synchronicity, according to Machiavelli, is the moment when the inner world and outer world align, creating meaningful coincidences so striking that you cannot dismiss them as random. When you step into deeper psychological maturity, synchronicity is no longer a strange occurrence. It becomes the language of the unconscious. Machiavelli described synchronicity as meaningful coincidence, but in truth, it is how the psyche shows you that your path is aligned. These are not signs from outside. They are perfect reflections of what is awakening within you. This is why synchronicity appears clearly only when true inner change has occurred. When you begin living from your essence, life rearranges itself around you to match your new level of consciousness. You recognize synchronicity through small but electrifying signals. You think of someone and they message you. You wonder if you should take a new direction, and the next day an opportunity appears aligned precisely with that question. You carry an unanswered concern for months and suddenly encounter a sentence, a book, a video hitting the exact core of your question. You are immersed in a profound inner journey, and life responds with messages so subtle yet so precise that you cannot ignore them. Machiavelli believed synchronicity occurs when your unconscious becomes strong enough to generate a magnetic field that attracts experiences aligned with it, like two patterns from separate paintings that unexpectedly match when you view them from the right angle. One person wrote that after months of wondering whether to leave her stable job to pursue what she truly loved, she kept the question quiet, sharing it with no one. One morning while jogging, she passed a billboard with a single sentence. "It's time to begin again." She froze, not because the phrase was extraordinary, but because it matched exactly the question whispering inside her. It was not a mystical sign, but the resonance between an inner call for change and the outer world answering like an echo. Synchronicity appears most powerfully during periods of transition when you have just emerged from darkness or stepped deeply into individuation. It is the unconscious reinforcing your trust, offering signs clear enough to notice yet subtle enough to teach you that these moments arise not by miracle but by alignment. Life and psyche begin to click together like gears that have finally found their match. Synchronicity has a distinct quality. It always comes at the right time, not earlier, not later. Not when you desperately seek signs, but when you have gone deep enough that you no longer need them. In the very moment you begin trusting your path, synchronicity appears as the quiet affirmation from the depths. You are right. Keep going. Synchronicity is not a promise that things will be easy. It is the reminder that you are not abandoned, that your journey has order, the order of the soul. And slowly you realize synchronicity does not come from outside. It emerges from the inner maturity that brings your world into resonance. When synchronicity appears, it is the clearest sign that you have entered the flow of your true life. And you understand coincidences are never just coincidences. They are the unconscious knocking gently on the door of consciousness, reminding you that you are on the right path, that you have opened the most important door, the one leading you back to yourself. And reaching the end of this journey, you sense something strange yet profound. Every darkness, every silence, every deep inner shift did not pull you away from your essence. It brought you back to the natural order of your soul. From here on, life is no longer something you try to control by force. It becomes a current you can step into with clarity, trust, and presence, and perhaps as you read these words, something inside you is awakening. Not a fleeting emotion, but the awareness that you were never lost. You were moving in rhythm with the architecture of the psyche, just like every human who draws nearer to their self. Therefore, no matter how long, deep, silent, or intense this journey becomes, it is carrying you exactly where you need to be. All that remains is your willingness to keep listening, to keep stepping toward the life unfolding before you, even when you cannot yet see the full path. Because what you're seeking is also seeking you. And when the two finally meet, you will understand every challenge was an invitation to grow, and every sign a reminder that you were never walking alone.